So with our lovely little miss, she's so stinking cute in her pink. So this is our little Bella Mae. Yes. What we're going to warm up with little Miss B is we're going to warm up with a couple little find its with reorientation to me from the environment. So I know you've seen probably a couple of the videos now where I do find that was very nice, is I have moments where find its are one of my favorite go-to skills in the beginning. So view it almost again like your ABCs before they really know how to read a word. You're starting at an area or a situation which is attainable for the puppy or even the adult dog. So right here, I'm using a little bit with my positive interrupter, which is that little kissy noise. With a find it, for example, I would show it right to my puppy's nose, toss it off to the side, have them go grab it, and then from there, regain their attention by either doing that little positive interrupter, or you could also work a little bit with name recognition. So again, I'm going to toss the food, have her go find it, and then I could go, Bella, and then yes, and feed her for that. So we do want to practice a little bit sometimes with movement behaviors. A lot of times puppies have a hard time staying still. Yes. So at times when you're first warming up, I find getting them in the groove of doing some find its is a really nice way to allow for some energy to come out, but also keeping her working under her threshold, which means that for some puppies, yes, novelty equals a lot of excitement. And when there's a lot of excitement, yes, there can also be a lot of jumping and mouthing. So what we're doing with little Miss B right now is getting her to, when she comes near me, I can feed for all four on the floor, or if she offers a gorgeous little sitting position, I could feed for that as well. I'll be sending along some materials since you guys are new to the program. So that way you'll be having written versions, visuals, also other videos on top of the videos that you're getting with your babes practicing in the Doggy Day School program. So with Miss B right now, she's working on doing some find its with reorientation, yes, back to me. You can, of course, simply just feed for behavior you're looking for, find it, or you can, again, start to implement, again, Bella, and start to build in that lovely name recognition and some of those recalls that you had mentioned she's been doing pretty well with. But we want to keep going in the direction of still feeling comfortable recall and that it still becomes reliable as she goes from young baby to an adolescent. So puppyhood is typically 5 months and below. And a lot of times when puppies start to hit more around the 6-month mark, you're then dealing with a teenager or an adolescent up until about 18 months to 2 years of age. So right now, behaviors and skill sets, Bella, might be much easier and seem like your puppy understands the concept, but it could also be because she's so little, she's a lot more attentive to you when she's this young. A lot of times people then call or let me know, hey, my puppy has now decided to not pay attention. They're on purpose ignoring me. They're not paying attention. In those situations, a lot of times the babes didn't really understand the full spectrum of the skill or behavior you're working on. They may have just been more attentive to you because of their age group. As they hit adolescence, you're going to be dealing with a brain and a body that is still under construction, and their ability to function, like I mentioned for Mr. Z earlier. With Zeus, he is now going into adolescence, which means that hormones and, again, developmental stages will differ compared to babyhood or puppyhood. So this is beautiful, yes. So right now, I'm also capturing any good behavior that I want to have happen again. I know I mentioned a little earlier with Mr. Z is think about all these different skills or behaviors as having a bank account. So right now, if you're finding that you're giving a lot of snacks and you're worried about tummy upset, I would highly recommend dice up your snacks into itty bitty little tidbits, but also create treat stations where you're mostly using your puppy's kibble mixed in with some training treats. So now the kibble smells like the training treats. That way you don't have to necessarily always walk around with a treat pouch in the beginning, unless you would like. I do find it's easy access to feed and reinforce for things you want to have happen again. But I would definitely make it where treat stations could be nice because you might have one in the kitchen, one in the living room, or in the bubbles that you tend to hold, the puppy in those little sections. So right here, she comes to visit. I'm going to go ahead and feed for that lovely moment. So we're going to create behavior through luring, shaping, and capturing. Oh my gosh, chewing is optional. And we will also, I'll be sending along information so you'll have written versions of all the things we're working on and touching base on. So I know you guys had mentioned that you're struggling with some house training, which is very normal for puppies to have some trouble in that scenario. I'm going to grab a few of her chews real fast so I can give her something to work on while I'm also blabbing. So I'm sorry that I'm out of camera range for just a second. Just going to grab a few of these different items. So I also tend to love using slow feed bowls or enrichment type items. Remember that enrichment does not, for example, replace what your babe might need for exercise or for experience and getting out and about. So slow feed bowls, though, can be a wonderful way to slow down a pup or an adult dog that tends to eat very quickly. So I tend to go with some that are a little bit larger. I don't want it to be so frustrating the puppy doesn't feel that they can reach the item, but I want it to be where they can't instantly figure it out super quickly. So if, let's say, for example, this helps her slow down and eat her food a little bit less with gulping, it may not be a bad option to try for a slow feed bowl. You can also find more enrichment tips and ideas as well in some of the resources I'll be sending along to you guys. But when it comes to your babe doing house training, remember that for puppies and dogs, so sometimes you might adopt an adult dog, or you might take in an adolescent or a puppy, we're going to still work the same skills no matter what age group. So if, let's say, our lovely lady is really struggling, I would recommend to start creating a schedule where you see how many times throughout the day she goes pee and poop. So for example, if you know you feed so much per day, and you also may want to use a measuring cup, not to restrict water, but to figure out how much water is going into the bowl and how much water, or for example, messes are coming out of the beauty. So if, let's say, for example, no one's really keeping track, she might have just all of a sudden chugged the remainder of her water, then someone else in the household didn't notice, refills it, and now she's had double the amount in a very small span of time. A lot of times with puppies, I would highly recommend you want to bring them out as often as you can. So let's say every 30 to 40 to an hour time frame. So you can have as many good positive outings to the real world in which you'd rather have them go to the restroom. So for puppies and for dogs, remember that going to the restroom is a form of communication. So for them as an animal, learning that there's only a designated potty zone that lives only outside can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge. Doesn't mean it's not attainable, but it can lead to a little bit of confusion between the two worlds. So I like to think about your puppies and your dogs as, for example, a furry little exchange student who doesn't know what's expected of them verbally, culturally, or physically. So since going to the restroom is a form of communication, when you feel you need to go, you just typically go when you're a dog. That's going to be a little bit of a learning moment that the outside zone is the place that you'd like potties to happen in. I would recommend to, while she's in the home, if you know she hasn't gone in a little while, she either needs to be tethered to you with her leash so you can keep an eye on her, or she goes back to an enclosed area where she's been successful not going to the restroom. So that could be a crate, that could be a corralled section. If, for example, she has like the full run to the kitchen, or even bigger spaces than that, what can end up happening is they can go wander away, go pee, and then go back over to the other little zone and continue on their merry way, playing or wrestling or whatever they were doing. Anytime your puppy takes a nap or has a little bit of play or exercise and romps around, or just has finished eating or chewing or drinking, I recommend to bring them out for a potty break. Keeping a log or a journal, it doesn't have to be extensive, but you could write down the time in which she went pee or poop, and then you start to notice a pattern of how many times she has to go to the restroom, with also how much food or water is going in. And then a lot of times puppies tend to struggle even more if they're also overtired. So puppies need between 18 to 20 hours of rest and sleep, for example, in a 24-hour period. So if she is not getting enough rest, that means she's going to also turn into that lovely land shark that you're probably not the biggest fan of. So if you find she has little wild Tasmanian devil moments, which happens to a lot of puppies, it's typically they're overtired and they don't know any other way to show how pooped out they are. So if you're finding she's non-responsive, she's just a lovely little woman with only teeth available, then that normally means we've gone past the point where she would have needed a rest period even a little bit sooner than that. So just like you might have a schedule for going to the restroom and you might have a little bit of a schedule for when you feed her, you may want to also include mandatory rest periods or naps where she has downtime to work on novel chews or lick items in those safe bubbles where she's been rather successful. I'll be sending along a whole slew of resources, so don't worry if we don't dive into everything instantly in one of our little videos. If you have questions or concerns, you can always check back in. But for now, what I would recommend is maybe she's out for a little bit, she goes to the restroom first, then she can be off leash in the bubble in which you're watching her. And maybe if, let's say, you need to leave her for a moment, she goes back to a safe zone where you know she can't get into trouble or have a potential accident. You don't want to scold mistakes. So a lot of times people think of behavior as good or bad, like I was mentioning a little bit earlier. And the problem with that is that you might clump normal dog behavior or responses to the environment or even fear or anxiety or normal things like going to the restroom as there's a good moment and a bad moment to that. So what I mean by that is we would deem going to the restroom a bad dog behavior in the home, but a good dog behavior outside of the home. So the problem with that dynamic is that if you scold your puppy making a mistake in the home, they're not going to understand that you're mad as to where they went. They're going to think you're mad at them in general and for just going to the restroom. So your puppy needs to start realizing that, for example, anytime I go to the restroom, nothing bad is going to happen to me. So if, let's say, for example, we by accident ended up scolding the puppy or startling them for making the mistake of going to the restroom in the kitchen or wherever the bubble might be. Some folks might be like, no, bad puppy, and sort of startle the puppy out of the potty accident. The problem with that is that your puppy won't, again, realize you're mad as to where they're going. They're going to think you're upset because they're going in the first place. So if we start to scold going to the restroom and having an accident, the puppy might move away from you the next time they have to go pee and maybe go into another room away from us to try to go to the restroom without having the repercussions again. The problem with that setup is it still gets the puppy nervous to go around you to go to the restroom. So let's say you've been scolding going to the bathroom. You then, when you go to leash her up and bring her outside, she might be like, gosh, I couldn't possibly go in front of you again. You might get overwhelmed and get agitated with the bathroom break. So I would recommend no scolding, no trying to startle them out of the pee. If you have an oopsie, get a nice enzymatic cleaner, so Simple Solution, Nature's Miracle. If you're using regular household cleaners, your puppy will still be able to smell where they once went. So remember that for your babes, wherever they are is probably the greatest place to go to the restroom. So that's that learning moment for your puppy to learn that the outside bubble is where we go to the bathroom. If, for example, she is having a hard time and even soiling in the crate or soiling, a lot throughout the day, going pee, especially, or also sometimes even pooping, it's also sometimes a bit of a stress moment. So if your babe is having a hard time with separation, there's definitely some great videos to take a peek see over preventing separation anxiety and building that separate time together while you're still even in the house. As not being scary or threatening. The other thing too for our little lady is if you're finding she's unable to really hold her bladder, I always like to rule out medical reasons behind behavior. So there have been at times where puppies have had a UTI. There have been at times where puppies have had, because of their conformation, a hooded vulva, which I know sounds very, spooky. But if, let's say, for example, your puppy has something where they're medically having a hard time with something, that could be slowing down the house training because of the, again, medical reason behind the behavior. So I always like to rule out medical first before we try to work on it behaviorally too. So for our little lady, when doing your house training, I would highly recommend, if she's food driven, you could be using food every time she goes potty. For some of the dogs, though, they're so interested in food, they forget to go to the bathroom. So one of my previous girls was so in love with food that it always equaled thinking or checking in or working a skill, that every time I had a snack, she would come up to me and offer a gorgeous little sit or a check-in when all I wanted her to do was go to the bathroom. So for some babes, you can also put the potty break on a slogan. So you might say, go do potty time. You might say, hurry up. If you're going to pick a word, I'd recommend to pair it while the puppy's doing it without trying to startle them. So if, let's say, you're going to be doing hurry up, you wouldn't want to mid-pee with the puppy go hurry up and make it really loud and surprising, because it might startle them right out of the bathroom break. But if you are feeding for the restroom moment, you want to, right as they're just about done, go yes, and then feed them for that potty. If the food is presented well after the event, the puppy will not realize it's for going to the restroom. There have been times where sometimes people will be like, oh, I gave them a snack once they came into the house after going potty. And what your dog thinks is happening is for stepping into the kitchen and sitting in the kitchen floor, that's what's giving them the paycheck. So right there, I just did a little kissy noise just to regain my girl's attention, fed her for that lovely check-in. Remember too, that if your babe is struggling, so they're either unable to respond, they're not taking food, they're very mouthy, remember, check to see, have we met her needs first? Has she gone to the restroom? Has she had a good nap? Has she had appropriate chew items or some interactive play? And then part of it too is, has she gotten enough rest? So a lot of times puppies are having an immensely hard time coping when they're really tired and fatigued. But if you're giving those lovely mandatory rest periods along with also those structured potty breaks, you're gonna start to help her through house training as well as through some of that excessive teething behavior. So again, we'll do a little check-in, beautiful feed for that. So, but we'll give her a little break for some of this information, and then we're going to work a few other little skills and dive into some other behavior as well. Nice job, cuteness. Two, feel free. I know that right now you guys will have your videos to watch, but there's been previous students as well that might even have other topics that you're struggling with. So with the YouTube channel, you can then see, again, the puppy's name is listed first typically, and then what topics I dive into for that practice video. So you may find that for her, there might be some other beneficial puppy videos that might also be topics that you're struggling with. So again, I'm gonna see, ready? Yes, what a good girl. So right there, I just did my little pause of interrupter, just tried to gain her attention, and then I fed her for coming into my space. Chewing is still optional, but I'm gonna also feed either all four on the floor or those beautiful little sits that she might offer as well. But we'll give her a little breather and we'll work a few more little skills in just a moment for our little Miss B. But she did so nice for her first little session.